So once you've decided what type of fabric you want, what count you want to stitch on, what colour you want, the last thing you need to think about is what size of fabric you need to buy, what size the piece that you're going to be stitching on needs to be, because you don't want to be buying an enormous big bedsheet size piece of fabric for a little project. So on our chart here, it's actually telling us the stitched area. So the design area, if we stitch on 32 count, is going to be 13 1/8 inch by 16 3/8 inches. Now, in that case, I would say, okay, well then we need to add on a few inches around the edge for a border so that our piece isn't just touching the edge of the frame. And then we'll need to add on a couple of extra inches for the framing at the back. So that's simple enough, and then we can convert it into centimeters. But what happens if it doesn't tell us how big the design area is? Or more likely, what happens if I say, okay, well, I don't want to stitch on 32 count. I want to stitch on 28 count, or I want to go the other way and I want to stitch on 36 count. What do I do then? Well, then we need to do a whole different calculation. Now, you can do that by hand if you want. Personally, that sounds like torture to me and I couldn't be bothered doing that. So I just like to go onto an online calculator, and I'm going to show you my favorite one now. So this is the Yarntree calculator, beloved by cross-stitchers across the world. I think we've all used this more times than any of us would care to admit, but it's really, really simple. So you put in your stitch count. Where did we get our stitch count? We got it here on our chart. There's our stitch count. So we pop that in to our website. Then in this case, we're doing 32 count, but you could do 28 count, 36 count, whatever. Of course, we're stitching over 2, as we've discussed already. Now, in our piece, we will be stitching over 1 for a very small amount, but the majority is over 2. So that's what we're going to put in there. And then we're going to stick in 2 inches around the edge for the border, 2 inches again around that for our framing. And then it spits out our stitched area, which is exactly what was on our chart, because again, we're using our recommended fabric count. And then it is saying, okay, well, this is how big your piece of fabric needs to be. I would convert that into centimeters. If you live in the US, you would probably want to leave that in inches, but in Europe, fabric is sold generally in centimeters. And then that's the size that I would buy. So really, really simple.